welcome to our show, Brilliant Business Insights. I'm Jen Fredericks. This is Lori Kuhn, and we're here to help you cut through the workplace BS, the business stress. So today's topic is stuck in the middle. Cue the music. Stuck in the middle.
Yeah, you know, that's where my head went.
The dilemma of middle managers. Why are we even focusing on the dilemma of middle managers today?
Well, it's interesting because I always say, if you want to know the health of your organization, talk to your middle managers. They're very indicative of what's going on within. It's a good pulse to take within your organization.
I understand, but I would rather talk about the C-suite, the executives, the board, you know, where all the good stuff happens.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's interesting because you say all the good stuff. But yeah, the people on the front line will be going, oh, no, this is where all the good stuff happens.
This is where
This is where stuff gets done.
They are the cookie part of the Oreo, and we are the cream filling.
And so the interesting piece of that is you have the upper management that says, you know, we're where all the stuff gets done. And then you have everybody on the front line saying, no, we are. And the interesting thing is, it's the middle managers that are the ones engaging in the dynamics of all of it.
True.
Yes.
Above and below.
Yep.
Wow.
And so it's interesting because there was a storm last night.
Yes.
And so the best analogy I came up with was a storm. And so I can sleep through storms. I don't have a problem with that. What I can't sleep through is my animal that gets totally freaked out by storms.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's the one that can't deal with it. So if we move on to the next slide, well, when you think of middle management, it's all aspects of what's going on. So all aspects of the workflow. And so they're getting pressures from all levels. And so they're getting pressure from the personnel side. They're getting pressure from the management side. They're getting pressure from above and below. Mm-hmm. And so let's get back to the analogy. So from the perspective of the storm, it's the high winds. Mm-hmm. So the high winds are coming in and they're dealing with the storm starting to come. So that could be project management.
I hear the storm
coming.
Yeah,
there we go. So it could be, you know, the winds coming in. Maybe it's a new project coming in. Maybe it's change management's happening. Mm-hmm. So they're dealing with that side of it. And then the next piece is the storm hits. So now they have the rain, they have the hail, they have all the other stuff that's going on in the midst of it, in the midst of the change, in the midst of the project. You know, maybe they're off schedule. Maybe an employee was sick. Maybe, you know, the salespeople didn't convey to the client the right information. And so you have that middle storm piece that they're being pelted with. And then you have the aftermath. So the storm is gone, and there's that residual that has to be cleaned up.
Yes.
And so not only are they responsible for all the aspects of it and the residual, and getting back to the analogy of it, the original analogy with the dog that's not very happy.
Yeah, buddy.
Is you have the different personality types. Mm. So you have the person that thinks, oh, my dog, oh crap, my dog's up, he's waking me up, it's the middle of the night, what am I going to do? How can I resolve both issues? How can I get sleep so I can go to work the next day and function? And how can I pacify my dog so he doesn't keep me up? And so then you have the person that thinks, and this is like my daughter, I call her a human, or I call her Buddy's human support person. Oh, yeah. So instead of a dog, yeah, you have an emotional support dog. Yes. She's the emotional support human for the dog.
Yes.
But so then you have the personality type that thinks, my dog's freaked out. I need to nurture my dog. I need to spend time with my dog. And they're not thinking about, I got to go to work in 5 hours. They're thinking, I have to take care of my dog. And so not only is the middle manager dealing with all aspects of the storm, but now they're dealing with all these different personality types. They're dealing with the personality type of, I got to resolve the issue. Mm-hmm. And they're dealing with the personality, I got to find the best solution for everything, the holistic approach. Or the personality type that just takes care of the dog and they don't think past, I need to comfort my dog. And so that's where, when we talk about being stuck in the middle, they're dealing with every aspect of it. And so I don't like making it a generational thing. And if we go on to the next slide, we will, we can get into the generational side of it, which is there are people that jump straight into solutions, and there are those that nurture the problem. Then there are those that do both, and I call them middle managers.
Okay.
And so when I'm talking about them being stuck in the middle, that's the aspect where they're being stuck in the middle. They're managing all these dynamics, all of it, correct.
All of it. That's a lot.
Right. And so when they find themselves dealing with trying harder to prove themselves, the beginning, middle, and aftermath of a storm, the added layer of fear, they have a lot of fear going on because, frankly, in larger corporations, especially in a time like we're currently in, middle management's the first to go. And I don't like to say that, but it's an easy thing to cut costs, to go in and weed out a group of middle managers. And so especially when times are tight, they're operating from a little more fear because they feel that need to prove themselves and that need to have the best team, make sure their team's on top of stuff. So they have a little more added pressure when they're in that space. They also have scattered attention on a myriad of things. When you're talking about peak performance and you're talking about doing your best, it comes from the place of focus. And so with middle managers being pulled in so many directions, they lose that focus.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, so there's a lot going on with this topic. And so that's one reason we invited our guest today.
Yes,
Lauren,
because she's an expert in it.
She's an expert in it.
Yeah, we have to bring in
Lauren
the expert.
Pagenkopf. And she can totally correct me when she comes on. But like to go ahead and welcome Lauren on. She is owner and principal of Laurus Consulting. She thinks that great leaders never stop learning and growing. Driven by a desire to help leaders and organizations realize their potential, Lauren brings 25 years of broad business experience to her executive coaching, leadership development, and consulting practice, along with firsthand knowledge of today's quickly evolving business environment and the challenges leaders face. So Lauren works with clients in a wide variety of industries and with leaders from executive level to new managers. She facilitates workshops for learning and development, helping leadership teams improve their effectiveness, and supports organizations who want to improve their cultures. Welcome, Lauren. It sounds like you can bring so much to these middle managers.
Thank you. Yeah, well, you hit on a lot of the things that I hope to talk about today. But I happen to have been, I work with all levels, but I've been working with a lot of middle managers for the last several years, not just as a coach, but facilitating leadership development, training and development with them. And the beauty of doing both is having them in a learning situation, but then being able to talk to them about how do you apply this in real life back in your job, which is very different, right?
Yes.
Because you can learn great leadership skills. They are learnable. But then when you go back, you're bumping up against some of the cultural forces that you mentioned, right? And so the trick is, how do you navigate everything that's going on up here that's coming down your way, and then everything you want to do for your team that you're supposed to do as a leader, but maybe you haven't gotten all the tools that you need or the support that you need to do that well.
A certain level of management doesn't mean that you know everything about everything. I mean, sometimes you need training. And one of the examples I always use, because this was very prevalent in public accounting, is because you're a good accountant, you get moved up the ladder.
That's right.
And so next thing you know, you find yourself as a partner or senior manager, and you don't know how to manage people. You're just really good at accounting, and now you're in this position where you have 20 to 100 people under you, and you're like, I don't know what to do with all these people. And so you're doing it on the fly.
Yeah.
And so I love that you're going to talk about, just being able to ask for what you need and get what you need.
Right. Like you said, middle managers are a great barometer, right? And so what I find is when I talk to, especially several middle managers from the same organization, you really get a sense of what's going on in the organization from the top all the way down. And so they are in the best position to say, is communication flowing both ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is it consistent when your senior leaders walk out of the room with a decision or a change that's coming? Are they saying the same thing? Are they supporting you the same way so that everybody can make that flow all the way down? You mentioned something earlier that I just want to touch on before I talk about, what they need to ask for. When there's so much chaos, too many priorities, I use that word loosely because it seems to be everything,
Yes.
right? You tend to focus on what you can control and you get more myopic, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so they're being told, I need you to be more strategic. I need you to have a view across the enterprise, right? But the tendency is to just focus on, well, this is what I can control or manage or influence. And so you don't get the best out of those leaders because they're not working across, to be able to accomplish more. So one of the things that I often start with is asking them, can they focus, right? So what's getting in the way of their focus? Too many priorities is a big one, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when we talk about so what happens because you have too many priorities? I often hear, well, I work longer hours, or I feel like I never get anything done. I don't have time for leadership activities, right? Which is ironic given that they are, most of them, being invested in by their organizations because they want to support them as leaders. But it's like those activities aren't given the same value and importance and reinforcement that their big project or ERP implementation is, right? So it's like, be a leader, but you still have to be a doer all the time too, and there's no room for leadership. So one of the first things I do is ask them to involve their direct supervisor more, because a lot of times they get this pressure, like, just find a way to get it done,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yes.
Which is like, that's magical thinking, right? So let's, it's like a math problem, right? And this is unsolvable because you're saying, well, do it all, even though all is overflowing. So what I ask them to do is be really transparent when you sit down with whoever this is coming from. Sometimes it's other senior leaders, dotted line, that kind of thing. Wherever the pressure is coming from, maybe it's your peers. Being transparent about, here are all the requests that have been made of me, right? Let's talk about which are most important right now. Okay, because something's not going to get done. You're just being honest about it, right?
Right.
You're always making choices and trade-offs about what gets done. And so be transparent about it. Involve your leader. And if they say, well, you have to find a way to get it all done, then it's like, okay, here's where I'm planning to put my attention. So just know there's risk over here of it not getting done, 100%, those kinds of things. So that's the first thing I say, is be really transparent about what the risks and trade-offs are, because so much of the time, especially with high performers, they think, I ought to be able to take it all on. They get in their own way.
Yeah,
Right.
right.
Yeah.
Right.
The people pleaser, the fixer.
Right.
Yes,
Yes,
person.
give me more people to manage, as well as another, project, an RFP to get
Yeah.
done. I've been out of the business a little bit.
Yeah.
Whew.
Right.
But yes, it was so much to juggle, and it was complete chaos most of the time.
Well, and then that dinks your performance. So when we were talking about peak performance on another show, and it's like, when you start taking on that much, you start losing that productivity level. So it now takes you longer or twice as long to do a project. And so it's you finding that sweet spot of putting in just enough work to get maximum benefit. But like you said, when you're taking on too much and you're always operating in overload,
Right.
it's your performance, what you can get done, and the quality of what you get done starts suffering.
Absolutely. The other thing that suffers, because you got the work, the task, then you got the human side, which I know you guys really care deeply about, right? And so your satisfaction, your level of engagement suffers. And I work with a lot of people who still work really hard. It's not that they're not working, but their investment in the outcomes, their engagement, right? Their commitment goes down, and their satisfaction goes down. So I've had some of my clients describe themselves as like a vessel that work just passes through, right? Which is just really sad.
We sigh.
Yeah, it's like, right?
No.
Yeah, it's really sad because it's so much wasted talent. And, you know, I see a leader's job is creating the conditions that get the best out of everyone, including their satisfaction, right?
Yeah.
You get the best performance out of them, and they are engaged, and you're using their strengths. And that's what, you know, you're going to be at peak performance if you can do those things.
But so you have this, I hear this dichotomy where, you know, you have management coming in and saying, you know, just get this done, just get this done. And then on the flip side, and this is what I hear from a lot of my clients, you also have them coming in going, be innovative, be efficient. And you're like, they're in contrast.
Right. Right. Opposing forces, right? And so that's the cultural thing I talk about. So, you know, I've done values work with companies too, where it's like, okay, we want to be more creative, more innovative. That's great. Are you ready for that?
Yeah.
Because if people can't try new things because they're so risk averse, because they've gotten dinged on their performance, for example, or if they can't fail, like tight time frame, this is a big investment, you know, we really can't afford to fail here. Of course, you're not going to be innovative, right? Your culture has to completely support it, and leadership has to reinforce it, right? Like it's about learning more than it is about failure or winning, right? It's like, what do we learn? How do we do that better?
Right.
So that's the part that I think gets just missed sometimes is how do you take all the pieces of your system and have them reinforce, you know, the values and the behaviors that you say you want, right? Just like if you're going to send middle managers to leadership training and development, how are you allowing them to lead? How are you giving them the support to lead, right?
The space and time to practice what
Right.
they've learned.
And incorporate it, because they go out and learn all these cool things, and then they come back and can't use any of it because of the dynamic they slot themselves right back into the dynamic that they were sent out to be trained on changing.
Right.
Yeah.
And so kind of getting back to what you were saying before, asking for what you need. This is another thing I work with them on is how are you disempowering yourself? You're waiting for the feedback that you want. You are waiting for the direction that you think this higher up owes you. And they do, but you're not getting it. So what do you want to do about that? And it's sort of like, you know, what can you change something here? Can you accept something? And how much can you tolerate, right? Because you always have to look at, and this is deep work. And one of the things that I think people get love about having a coach is that I make them stop and reflect on these things, which they never. That's right. I'm like, okay, I'm going to make you do this, but they just don't have time normally. And when they go home, they're busy too. So I actually force them to think about, what are my values? Where are my boundaries? What boundaries do I want to establish? Are you familiar with the book Essentialism by Greg McKeown?
No.
Okay. It's a really great book, and it's about intentional choices and trade-offs, right? And high impact work, and not, the do-it-all thing is just it's ridiculous, right? So you're a non-essentialist if you say yes to everything, right? So
no, I was a non-essentialist.
You were, but
years. I'm not.
You're not, right? So I'm going to affirm that you're no longer that. No, but it's about really being intentional, eyes wide open, which is what I was talking about with the transparency. And one of my coaching clients, and I just finished my engagement with him. I always get a little sad when I have to say goodbye to people.
Yeah, it's rough.
But he read that book, and he said that actually influenced his decision to do some deep thinking about himself and change jobs.
Wow.
Now, lest I scare off, employers who want to hire me. But the fact is, if he couldn't be fully invested, it's no longer the place for him anyway. And he was looking to take on more responsibility, and it just wasn't happening there, right? But when you have to do that deep work, and you have to determine where are your boundaries. And not, again, it's not like I'm going to be the Department of No now, but it's like, okay, you're asking me to do this big thing. Let's talk about what it would take to get that done. Here's how I could get that done. And that involves not doing this, doing less of this, somebody else does this, we do it later, all the options.
There's so many dynamics right? There's so much more that goes into it. And so many people, especially I find in middle management, just take it on.
That's right.
Yes.
And one of the examples I like to use is there was a guy at one of my clients who his boss came by, and he was they have a lot of layers of management, but his boss comes by and is like, here, can you do this for me? Can you get this done? This is the project, this is the basis, this is what I need from it, go. And he's like overwhelmed. He has project deadlines. He's like, now I have to fit this into what I'm doing. And I happened to be there one day doing a training. And he brings it in and I'm like, why does she need that? Like, as he was explaining it to me, I'm like, what benefit? And in my head, and I used to do business risk consulting, so my brain always goes there. But I'm like, what benefit is that going to add? That type of report. And so I asked him, he's like, I don't know. My manager just told me to do it. And I'm like, well, ask her what she's getting at. So maybe there's some components that you can leave off. Maybe you don't need all of that. And he's like, that's a great idea. So he goes back and asks, what are you getting at here so I can streamline this project? And she's like, well, I'm not sure. Her boss told her to do it.
Exactly. The trickle down.
The telephone
game.
So
she says, hang on, I'll get clarity. And she comes back and she says, never mind, he doesn't need it.
Oh my
Now,
goodness.
this guy could have spent several days doing this project that wouldn't have been necessary to begin with.
Right.
Because he didn't get, like, one of the things I always say is get clarity.
Yes.
Shore things up. Make sure, like you were saying, have those critical conversations.
You have permission to ask questions of those that lead you.
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
Even if you get a no, you should still ask, because if they don't know what you need, or if they don't know you have too much on your plate, of course you're going to keep getting more and you're not going to get what you need.
Yeah.
Right. So speaking up, empowering yourself to ask for something different, or clarity, or whatever support that you need.
Yeah.
And that is true. A lot of times you find out maybe the boss doesn't even know why, and it's just flowing through them. And that's
the vessel.
Yeah, and that's passivity, right?
Yes.
It's like I am blindly following orders, and you cannot get the best out of people when they're just following orders.
And you know what? And most companies don't want them to.
No, of course not. They say they don't.
Right. You create a culture of people following orders, and then you tell them, no, be creative. Don't just follow, or don't just do. This was a big thing in public accounting. Don't just do what you did last year. Like, the biggest complaint is don't do what you did last year. But then they're so crunched for time, and there's so much going on that you just do what they did last year, because you don't have the time to think out of what was, beyond what was done last year.
Sure.
Yeah.
Or it's not even modeled, right? Because a lot of times you don't know. When people say, I need you to be more strategic or innovative, it's like, well, how do I do that? I've never been asked to do that before. Right. What does that look like? And you want to see it modeled, and you want to get the tools. The pandemic was a great example. So threw a lot of white collar workers into this virtual situation, right? And all anybody was trying to do was just continue operations, right? It was very transactional. So, and because everybody thought, well, it's probably temporary, right? Mm-hmm. And then we realized this is not temporary, okay? At that point, that's when companies ought to have been figuring out, how do we help managers lead people differently in this environment? What tools do they need so that we can be intentional about it? Engagement looks different in a virtual environment. Managing for outcomes and goals, actually, goal management as opposed to management by site and things like that. They needed help with all of that, and they were just doing it on the fly. And then you've got 8 million productivity tools and communication channels, and now you're being monitored even more. It's like, Microsoft Teams or Slack or email and text, and should we have cameras on or cameras off? What's better for engagement? It was just a big opportunity once we knew we were going to be in it for a while, and coming back to the office, right? How do you support an environment that really thrives? So those are the kinds of things where it's like, just assuming that people will figure it out, you just don't get the best out of the organization. And
it's interesting, because I find, and I always go back to companies on this, it's those interpersonal skills. Like, you can bring in Workday, you can bring in time management software, you can do all of that. But if the interpersonal skill of the leader, of the middle manager, isn't good, if they don't have self-awareness, if they don't have emotional aptitude, if they don't have a lot of that personal responsibility, and critical communication goes into that, boundary, clarity, all those things that go into that, if that isn't good prior to all these systems are irrelevant, right? Yeah. Or they're just promoting or perpetuating an environment of ineffective behaviors.
Right.
And so I always say, great, you've spent hundreds of, even millions of dollars bringing this new system in. Awesome. Now let's train your people how to use it effectively.
Exactly.
Right, effectively in again, productivity and for people, what allows them, because you can't focus if you're constantly being bombarded, right? By, and similarly, a lot of middle managers say, I'm in meetings all day long, or I'm invited to a million meetings, right? It's like, which ones do you not have to go to? Or which ones are unproductive? And
Wait, I'm allowed to ask that question?
Yeah. Right. Or what is the purpose of this meeting? Right?
Can I see an agenda?
Exactly.
Do I need to
Do
be
I need
here?
to be here?
I was using that as an example when I was in public accounting. I had to account for every 6 minutes.
Wow.
And so
That's
if
a lot, right?
Yeah, I had to know.
Right.
Right. Well, because I had to bill the client. So it's like I would sit in a meeting, and if I didn't feel I needed to be there, I was calculating those 6 minutes going, this is unbillable for me. Get me out of here. I need to go be productive.
Right.
And so anytime I entered a meeting, it was, do you want me here to contribute? Is it critical that I'm here? Is it something I need to know? I mean, I had this whole chart or this checklist that I would go through to even before I even said yes to a meeting. Right. And I would even sometimes call the person putting it together and going, does it meet all my criteria? If not, or my non-negotiables? If not, sorry, can somebody else fill in for me?
Right. And you may not like that answer, but that's the answer I'm giving. I mean, another one I tell people is, if they book over time that's already booked on your calendar, why would you think you have to be there if they wouldn't even talk to you about it? And those are bad norms that have kind of come into existence because nobody challenges them.
Yeah.
It's like, why would you invite me to a meeting, especially if you think I'm critical, when I'm already supposed to be somewhere else?
Right.
So again, magical thinking.
Yes.
So yeah, a lot of it is just giving yourself permission to support yourself. Right?
Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But with middle managers, that's where the fear comes in.
Yes.
Because now if I have that idea of, if I don't prove my value and my worthiness and that they absolutely need me, if I say no to this meeting or I say no to my manager, there's that little twinge of I'm disposable.
It's that metric that we talk about sometimes, the metric of being productive, that equals your worth.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, like a machine.
Yes.
And so if I don't do these certain things, I may not be here tomorrow. And I actually worked, there was one of my clients was CFO at a company. Mm-hmm. And she was told by her boss, so she had just gone through a divorce. She needed to get home because the school had a snowstorm and she had to pick her kids up. And so the executive suite, they were all, and I don't mean to say, good old boys, but, they were old school. You be at work regardless of what's going on in your life.
They had help at home.
You need to be here and get stuff done, right?
Yeah.
And so she approached them and said, look, they had a snowstorm, the school's closing, I need to go get my kids. And they essentially said, if you leave, your job won't be here when you come back. And so my first thought was, that's still happening? Like there are still companies out there that do that. But ultimately she left and went to a company where that wasn't the case. But there are those people who still have that twinge of, they may let me go if I don't do these things.
Sure. Right. And that's why these conversations are difficult if you've never asked for something because you think it's your job to just just follow the boss, what the boss says. But it is really empowering, and it does, if you practice it and if you do more of it, it makes you realize, wow, this is my time, my life, right? And it does help you make those decisions if you can get some clarity, because in the end, you have to kind of go through all right, is this how I want to keep spending my time? Mm-hmm. How much is my battery? My dad always says this, how much is your battery being charged and how much is it being drained, right?
Right.
And if you are continually getting drained more than charged, you know where that goes, right? And so you can't do good work anyway. Now, depending on the job market and your personal situation, you may not be able to do that immediately, right? But you can still decide, I'm going to do what I need to do, and that's it while I figure out, which is sad, again. So yes, there is that concern, but sometimes when you help somebody talk through something and help them figure out, well, what can you do? what is possible to do that's good, satisfying work, and focusing on that while they kind of grapple with some of these other issues. What conversations can you have? Do you even know the answer? There's so many assumptions that get made, including about their direct reports. Well, I think they would appreciate this. I think that, well, why don't you ask them?
Right? I can't tell you, Lauren, I'm so glad you brought that up. I can't tell you how many teams I work with, and they're like, well, the person from this department that they were creating the project or that was heading the project, well, she said this, so we were assuming. And I'm like, she's just down the hallway. Like, I can see her office from here. Go walk over there and ask. But they develop a whole program based on assumptions, and then they have to go back and rework it, and they've wasted, an hour on it. And I'm like, okay, is that a logic? In my head, it follows a logic that you would just go do that. But I'm surprised to get into large Fortune 500 companies and realize a lot of people operate that way.
But don't you think that has something to do with this emphasis on productivity? And they're being measured by it. How much are you getting done? And so our brains like to make shortcuts, right? And shortcuts include making assumptions because it takes longer to go find out and to go get clarity. You're paying for it later, though, as you said, because you got to go fix it. So I think that's part of the problem when there's so much emphasis on the stuff, get stuff done, get more done, get it done faster, and the productivity. You are sacrificing things like clarity, quality, right? Satisfaction, all of those things. So understanding the balance is really critical. And like we said, those middle managers are in such a good position to say, is it breaking down? Are we actually doing what we're saying we want to do? They see it. They see what's going on here, and they see how it plays out at the bottom, right?
Yeah. When we started talking about the middleman, and I was an account supervisor, I was an account executive. I was one of the account supervisors that when the layoff came, it was easy to let me go. So when we started talking about it, I was feeling like this inside, and so much swirl and chaos, and these middle managers. When I'm sitting here listening to the information being shared, can kind of be boiled down to pause enough to ask questions. Can it be that simple?
Oh my gosh.
To be effective as a middle manager?
Well, listen, right? Yes. Listen, ask questions. I mean, every single person I work with needs to do that better. I need to do that better. We all need to be better listeners and ask more questions for clarity. And I think that's where things start. If you're not afraid to ask questions, if you're really listening for, I didn't get the why. Why is this important to do? Why should I just dive into doing this report that's going to take me 3 days?
For those people who are afraid to ask questions because they're in that middle management position, they feel that they could be disposable if they ask questions or push back. Is there a safe question that someone could ask if they're not used to asking questions to help them move toward clarity?
Yeah, I often tell, people's tendencies are to do things in the negative. Well, why do we need to do that? Isn't it going to be a problem if? Or here's the problem I see, right? And so telling the person, if I'm going to take this on, I really want to do a good job, right? So what's the positive reason that you want to ask some questions? So I want to make sure I'm clear before we start doing this. I want to make sure I can explain to my team why we need to harness our resources here. So giving a good reason, right? Making sure you have the clarity that you need, making sure it makes sense, or that maybe there's not a better way to do it, right? And I think that's a positive way to frame it, is that I want to understand. I also want to understand how I balance this with other things. So let's make sure we've talked about the scope, or we've agreed to what the actual deliverable is, right? Those are all good reasons to ask questions. I don't think clarity, it should be a negative, but,
Well, and it's so I can do a better job.
Exactly.
And so
I care about the outcome.
And when you're presenting it and when you're asking the question, it's, I'm asking the question to benefit you, is what I heard you saying.
Yeah.
So I want to do the best job. This is going to reflect on you too.
Right.
And this is, we're in this together.
Mm-hmm.
And so asking the question from and getting clarification from, I'm asking this so that the team's clear. I'm asking this so that our product is better. I'm asking this so we can be more innovative and efficient and productive. And so it's not coming to slow things down or to
Right.
question your authority
Or push
or
back.
Positional.
right,
Yeah.
or to question your knowledge, but so that we can put together the best team and the best product.
Right.
Yeah.
What I hear then is that when you can bookend, for the middle managers watching who are looking for ways to start questioning and asking powerful questions so they can get clarity, so they can be effective in their job, is to bookend the question with a positive, how you want to help the company, how you want to help the team. And then I do like to use the help me understand
Yes.
that precursor, and then, bookend at the end. Great. Thank you for sharing that with me. Now I know I can boom, boom, boom. So it's also an opportunity to recap the conversation for you
summarize.
and the upper management.
Yep. Getting that, are we on the same page? Are we
Yeah.
in agreement that this is what I'm doing? Which I've had plenty of clients say, I did that, and yet, right?
Yes.
But you can at least go back to say, well, this is why I was working on what I was working on because we agreed to that. So yeah, I do think letting people know I care about doing a good job. And that's why I'm asking some of these questions. I'll tell you, these clients that I just finished with, it was a whole group of them. They all got some 360 feedback from coworkers and bosses, and it was verbatim comments, just 5 questions. And there were a bunch of people who got positive feedback from their colleagues that I'm so glad you always ask questions. I really appreciate that you're not afraid to ask questions. So you can bet that there are always other people that want to do it and they appreciate the person who does.
Yeah.
So what I hear you saying there is one way that organizations can help middle managers and their teams be more effective is give that space and breathing room to ask some of those questions for clarity. What else do you recommend organizations can do to help middle managers be effective?
Yeah, that alignment at the top is so critical, right? It's one voice. So whatever your decisions are, making sure that everybody's getting the same information at the same time if it affects the enterprise or multiple situations, making sure that you're clear about what the outcome needs to be, the goal, the expectations. Listening, same thing, right? Ask questions and listen. What concerns do you have about this? What questions do you have about this? What do you need to be able to be successful at this? So really asking the person, what do they need? And sometimes you want to ask them, what do you need to do for yourself? Right? Getting back to
what?
Yeah,
right.
And that's one of the things in our session on peak performance that I really talked about. From my standpoint, my first question to leadership and middle managers, especially, if you're in the midst of, well, in my case, busy season, was always, how are you doing? Did you get dinner? Did you get a good night's sleep? I want them to be at their best. So going back to alignment, I want them to align and be at their best, because then I know they're going to be more productive. Errors are going to be reduced. I know they're going to innovate more. They're going to have all those things we want our managers to be.
Right.
But it comes from a physiological place too.
Yes.
So it comes from, are you working from your parasympathetic nervous system, your calm, or are you working from your stress system?
Yeah.
And so do you have good nutrition going on? Did you get enough sleep? I would tell people, go work out. If you need to go to the health club, go to the health club. Because
eat lunch.
Yeah.
Right, eat lunch,
take a break and
water.
eat lunch.
Right.
Take a walk.
And we miss that when we're in the heat of that. Those are the first things to go. You go to McDonald's was an example we use. You
Event management. The first thing we would do is jump in the drive-through.
Right.
That was what we had time for.
And your exercise routine was the first thing to go, because you don't have time for that, and you're getting up earlier and you're not sleeping as well because you need to get into the office. And I'm like, no, do more of that when you're in those critical times.
Yeah.
Because that's going to make you more effective. That's when you're going to get the most done, and you're going to be working from your peak performance state or within your flow. And so from that place, we're talking about a McKinsey study where when you're in your flow, productivity goes up 500%. And I'm like, I had to look at the number again. Like,
That's
what?
incredible.
Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I have instances where my time is doubled, where I've been able to calculate I am twice as effective when I'm operating from this state, but to see the 500%, I was like, wow.
Right.
But so I think we really miss that in
Mhm.
management, that piece of it.
Definitely. And you just mentioned, when you're in your flow state, right? That requires focus. And so, speaking of asking for what you need, a lot of managers say, well, I want to have an open door policy so people have access to me. That doesn't mean you need to be interruptible all the time. And so, creating new norms, right? So, each of us has the right to block off X many hours each week to be uninterrupted. And we're agreeing to do that. And I'm going to let people know in advance that when I have this return message or this light on or this whatever, I am doing something that I don't want to be interrupted on unless it's truly urgent, and we'll define what urgent means. Right.
Yeah.
So it's like make agreements with people, create new norms so that everybody gets that support. Because as we said, these middle managers are often doers, and they're coach players, right? And so they need to be able to do both, and we all need some of that focus time. So you don't just get it, and you certainly don't get it if we've learned to interrupt ourselves all the time.
Well, especially with middle management, because like I was saying earlier, they're getting it from their
All
employees, they're
directions.
getting it, so they have this dynamic going off, and it makes me think of a time when right before college, I was working at Sperry, and they brought me in as a project person. So engineers, everybody would bring me special projects and whatever it was, graphing, you name it. But so because I dealt with so many departments, it seemed like every 10 minutes someone, hey, can you get this project? Can you get that? Or that project you were working on? And so it was nonstop this. And I'm like, I could literally just sit here and just answer questions.
Just field.
Right. Like,
But they
and
weren't
not
useful
work.
questions, not the ones that we were talking about, those powerful questions for clarity.
Right. Yeah, they were it was just the disruption. And like you said, have those designated times where you have to be productive and you're off limits because otherwise people they're down the hallway. Oh, I'll just stop by and see where she is on this. Or, she mentioned something, going to a concert. I'll stop by and see how the concert was. And they don't think twice about just popping in your office.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of knocking even on cubes.
Exactly.
Right? Like,
those aren't really exist.
Is it okay?
Yeah. These have been some really great tips that you guys have shared and we've explored for middle managers as they're working to be more effective. And just wondering, Lauren, before we wrap the guest segment, if there's anything else that you really want to pinpoint for these middle managers that can help make their work lives a little easier.
Yeah, I think part of it is take the time to reflect, right? Do some introspection because we go through the day and we just do things mindlessly. We're reacting as opposed to choosing how to respond to things. And so I know that's really hard to do, but finding that time to be a little bit introspective about, how am I getting in my own way? Those are the first things you can control, right? Your own choices. What am I willing to risk? Asking yourself some of those questions. What am I willing to tolerate? And that's a good start, right? Because that's that self-awareness. Because so often I hear middle managers being very frustrated and not doing anything.
Yeah.
So they're just kind of sitting in it.
And I'm so glad you brought that up. If you take anything away from this segment, don't sit in it.
Don't sit in
Yeah.
Like there are
frustration.
so many, I can go on for days, the dynamics that come out of sitting in something that's not working for you.
We'll probably have to make that a whole other show episode.
Right. Middle management sitting in dynamics that aren't working for them. Yes.
Well, Lauren, we want to thank you so much for coming by and sharing your thoughts on how to help middle managers be more effective in their work and have them enjoy their work. And is there a way that people can reach out to you if they'd like some more information on how you work with leaders?
Yes, definitely. So you can find me at laurusconsulting.com. Actually, Laurus Consulting LLC.com or www.laurusconsultingllc.com. And I'm happy to answer questions. I have a way to submit questions there. My phone number is there if you want to just give me a call. So yeah, I'd love to hear from people. I feel passionate about this work because it also shows the organizational issues, which is why I love working with senior leadership too.
Yes.
Right? They kind of set the tone. So yes, feel free to contact me if you're so moved.
Yeah.
And thank you to both of you. I appreciate the opportunity to discuss something that seems to be
It's
kind of
too
hot out
prevalent.
there.
Yeah, it's hot right now. Well, we
Yes,
appreciate you
yeah.
taking the time to stop by, and have a beautiful rest of your day. Yeah.
Thank you.
I can definitely relate to not knowing how to manage people well, especially when I was in that middle management position. Because I basically, just started. I was hired. I was going along doing my job, climbing the corporate ladder as you do, and wham! Hey, here, manage these people. Here, these people are out in the field. You manage those people and do your own job. And it was just taxing, and it deflated any confidence I had that I had built in my ability to do my job prior to starting to manage people. And then here, manage more people.
Yeah.
It was just so much.
And where was the foundation in that?
There wasn't.
Yeah.
But because I was really good at and this is my what the crap segment. So I was really good at the entry level marketing admin job that I was hired for. And so then it was like, okay, well, let's promote you. And now we'll have you start managing field employees. So, I mean, that's even more difficult to manage than those that are right there with you in the office. And then it went pretty well. So, hey, here's another promotion. And now we're going to give you 2 or 3 more people to manage.
And no more skills to manage.
No more skills, and you don't have any time to learn leadership skills to help manage. Because
and if you do, go out and do it on your own, and then don't bring back what you
Yep.
learned because you got to fit back into this structure.
Right. It's like you said, like, oh, hey,
Yeah.
you're good at accounting. You're good at numbers. Let's have you manage people without any training.
Right. You're a good introvert to put in a leadership role.
Right. Well, so then how did you get good at managing, Lori?
Well, so when I think about it, the first thing is it's not managing, it's leading.
Okay.
And so I always think about it from the leadership perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And so the advice that I would give middle managers and what I feel is most important in effective leadership is a high degree of self-awareness.
Yes.
We were talking
Love
about
that.
that with Lauren. It's knowing what you need, knowing how you operate, knowing what your limits are. And there's a lot that goes into that we won't get into. Another piece of it, we call it emotional aptitude.
Mm-hmm.
It's emotional intelligence. The ability to focus. Lauren mentioned that too. If you don't have concentrated time to really work on your stuff, you're not doing a good job on anything. It was my Motorola story. Like I didn't have enough time to finish a project. I was so busy answering questions and fielding concerns that projects weren't getting done. I did it because I don't like to say I'm good at multitasking because it's not a multitasking thing, but I grew up in a very large family and was used to the chaos around me. So I have this uncanny ability to laser focus during chaos. I'm really skilled at it, but I know a lot of people don't have that. So that was something I developed way early on. But focus is important in having that, like Lauren was saying, that time where you just shut off all the distractions.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing when to recharge. This is critically important.
Yes.
It's you got to feel good. If your body, if your mind, if your physiology isn't supporting you, forget productivity. And so many people miss that component of it. When the sleep goes out the window, when the nutrition goes out the window, when the stress increases, it's like, I don't even want to have a conversation about productivity at that point. It's you go get better, you go eat, you go sleep, you go and re-energize.
Yeah.
Then we'll talk about the next project that has to get done.
Well, what's coming up for me in all of this, and again, I haven't been in the corporate world for, as an employee for 7-8 years, is a new onboarding process is almost needed.
Yeah. And there's some people who do that.
That's
really
beautiful.
good.
I love to hear that. But I don't remember anyone talking to me about self-awareness, emotional intelligence, or aptitude. How do you focus? Starting with those personal skills,
the essential skills,
the essential human skills before you even start into your job, so that you're set up for success.
Right.
Whether you manage people or not.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow. Yeah. And then and when I talk about personal responsibility, because I always say I start out everything with personal responsibilities integrated into everything. But with middle managers, I really think about it in terms of like boundaries. And I think about it in terms of critical conversations and critical communication. And I think of it in terms of experiential listening, gaining clarity, because oftentimes we're afraid to ask, being heard. So, and part of that is getting what you need. And really conveying your ideas, really conveying, your expectations, and the accountability piece of it. And then the delegation, it's like Lauren was saying, you take on so much, and what aspects of that can you delegate? I have C-suite clients that I'm like, you're doing what? I'm like, do you enjoy doing? Because it's something that they should not be doing, and not that people want to get into a position where, well, that's not my job description, because you want people to come together and support the organization. Right. But really, they're doing things that they shouldn't be doing. And that someone else has been asking, give me more, give me more, give me more. And I'm like, that's a perfect thing to start delegating. And if you enjoy doing it, and that's refueling your spirit, absolutely do that.
If not, delegate.
But if it's just another thing on your plate, I find so many C-suites doing things that they don't want to be doing. And
and then you also hear, well, I don't delegate well.
Oh, I hear that all the time. I don't delegate well. Yeah.
Well, and to that I say, why not?
Right.
What questions can we ask?
Let's have that conversation.
Right.
Let's have that conversation.
Exactly.
And that's exactly what I do. And it's taking a look at, and like Lauren was saying, stepping back and reflecting on, was this the best use of my time? Going forward, is this how I want to spend my time? Going forward, is this something I want to continue doing? Is this something that should be on my plate? Or can I empower others to take this on? I mean, sometimes what executives miss is, I'm taking away the empowerment of the people below me, where if I can pass some of this on, I'm raising them up. I'm empowering them to step into the next role. I'm empowering them to, take on more responsibility, or learn better discernment, or learn better delegation, or learn better boundaries. And I'm not giving that level of management the opportunity to do those things if I start taking all of that on.
Right. What I hear in that is one of our Thrive Human Development principles, which is, we believe you've got this.
Yes.
And so do they.
Right.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Kind of a two-way street there.
Right. But I think we miss that when I'm busy when I'm the yes person trying to do everything and wear all the hats, I'm missing the piece that I'm actually taking an opportunity for self-empowerment and an opportunity for growth and learning from those people I manage if I'm not giving them that opportunity.
Yeah. That's true. And that's one of the things that the book that we're going to bring up again today, we've discussed it before in the book segment, is Dare to Lead with Brene Brown. And what I appreciate about the discussion we were just having, and how she communicates the need for self-awareness, which has been like the theme through this show, as well as connection.
Yes.
And building the connection between yourself and your leaders. So Dare to Lead is a great book.
Yeah, and I like that you bring up connection, because I always think of connection also from the standpoint of communication. So if my connection and my relationship with you is really strong, I can have those critical conversations with you. I can have those difficult conversations with you. And that's what's needed. I need to be able to be open and honest with you.
Wholehearted, not armored leadership.
Right.
That's awesome. Well, so Lori, what theme did you see stringing throughout today's episode, and what are you going to take away from it? Or what do you hope the middle managers watching will take away from it?
Well, so a lot of it is what I was saying. It's just being honest, and Lauren mentioned this, being transparent, getting what you need, having those critical conversations, just that awareness piece of it.
And I'm really going to invite middle managers to ask yourself if you want to be the vessel that work flows through, that Lauren mentions, that some people really feel that way. And I want you to be more than that. I want you to have more satisfaction and effectiveness in your job than that.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Well, thanks to our guest today, Lauren Pagenkopf with Laurus Consulting, to John Taylor, our video production guru.
Yep.
You can reach him at mkevideo.com. And special thanks to my co-host, Jen.
And always to Lori
Always
as
a
well.
pleasure.
Yes. And join us next time for Brilliant Business Insights, getting you where you want to go, feeling the way you want to feel, and being who you want to be by removing the BS.
Thanks, everyone.